ก็นิมนต์นะครับนิมนต์แล้วก็เจริญพรญาติโยมที่อยู่รอบๆห้องได้ยินเสียงนี้แล้วก็ถึงเวลาแล้วบ่าย2:45เป็นช่วงเวลาต่อไปที่อ่จะมีอ่าเซสชันที่อ่าดรปยีโพจอนะก็จะมาอ่า พูดในเรื่องของปฐมบทแห่งการศึกษาปัฏฐานในพระอภิธรรมก็ขอให้ทยอยกันเข้ามาในที่ประชุมระระหว่างทำนี้ก็จะขอเล่าประวัติเป็นภาษาอังกฤษภาษาไทยก่อนเนาะสำหรับคนที่ยังไม่รู้จักท่านดีเนาะ ดรปยีโพจอก็เป็นนักวิชาการและอาจารย์ชั้นนำในด้านพุทธศาสนาศึกษาเถรวาทโดยงานวิจัยของเธอก็ผสมผสานระหว่างการวิเคราะห์คัมภีร์ดั้งเดิมและการศึกษาเชิงมนุษยวิทยาในวิถีชีวิตพุทธศาสนาร่วมสมัยประวัติการศึกษาของท่านก็สำเร็จปริญญาตรีด้านเศรษฐศาสตร์และก็การจัดการจากมหาวิทยาลัยออกซฟอร์ดปริญญาโทด้านพุทธศาสนศึกษาจากสถาบันการศึกษาแอฟริกาและเอเชียนะ SOAS มหาวิทยาลัยลอนดอนแล้วก็สำเร็จการศึกษาปริญญาเอกPhD ทางด้านปรัชญาพุทธศาสนาจาก King College ลอนดอนนะแล้วก็มีบทบาททางวิชาการและก็การทำงานเคยดำรงตำแหน่งคณบดีฝ่ายวิชาการนะ Dean of Academic Affairs แล้วก็อาจารย์อาวุโสสาขาเทรวาทศึกษาที่ SSBU Chan State Buddhist University ของหลวงพ่อคำหมายนะเมื่อเช้านี้นะมันก็มีบทบาทสำคัญมากในการวางรากฐานหลักสูตรบัณฑิตศึกษาแล้วก็เป็นนักวิจัยอาวุโสรับเชิญนะเป็น Visiting Senior Research Fellow ที่ King College London ด้วยงานวิจัยของเธอก็จะเน้นในเรื่องของการนำเอาอภิธรรมแล้วก็การปฏิบัติวิปัสสนากรรมฐานก็ศึกษาพวกโครงสร้างทางปรัชญาที่ซับซ้อนจะเอามาประยุกต์ใช้ได้จริงยังไงในสายการปฏิบัติโดยที่มีการศึกษาของคณะสงฆ์ในเมียนมาร่วมสมัยที่เธอได้มีส่วนในการนำเอาความรู้ในทางอภิธรรมมาประยุกต์ใช้ในการปฏิบัติวิปัสสนาเพราะฉะนั้นก็เป็นผู้ที่ได้ยากมากนะที่สามารถที่จะนำเอาสิ่งที่ยาก2อย่างคือการวิปัสสนาแล้วก็การอภิธรรมมารวมกันแล้วก็มาสรุปบทเรียนต่างๆนะที่เธอได้วางหลักสูตรไว้ที่พม่าเพราะฉะนั้นอันนี้ก็เป็นโอกาสดีที่พวกเราจะได้ฟังปฐมบทแห่งการศึกษาปัฏฐานในอภิธรรมโดยดรปีโพจอโอเค Okay,
Um,
so
may
time's
I
come.
share?
So, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
May I share the screen, please?
แชร์หน้าจอ Okay, so let me introduce the next speaker, uh, Dr. Pyi Phyo Kyaw. He's a leading scholar and educator in Theravada Buddhist studies, blending rigorous textual analysis with ethnographic research on living traditions. She holds a BA from the University of Oxford, an MA from SOAS, and a PhD in Buddhist philosophy from King College, London, where she remains a visiting senior research fellow. She served as the Dean of Academic Affairs and a senior lecturer at Chan State Buddhist University in Myanmar, playing a foundational role in shaping its postgraduate curriculum. Her research heavily focuses on the intersections of Abhidhamma and Vipassana meditation, exploring how complex philosophical frameworks are applied in contemporary monastic lineage. Okay, and you can share your screen now, and
Thank you.
she's uh, from UK, and this very kindly joined the Zoom for us. And the topic this afternoon will be the introductions to the Patthana studies in Abhidharma. So the floor is yours, Dr. Pyi.
May I pay respect from here to all the venerable member of the Sangha and all the organizers there. Thank you very much for the invitation and all the organization and being very patient with me. So I want to before we look at today's topic, I want to explain how I ended up studying the Patthana, which you may know that this is the final text of Abhidhamma Pitaka. So for my doctoral research, I did a study of the Patthana from the textual point of view, but also using interviews and ethnographic data, meaning that I went to Myanmar and then I studied with various senior monks and nuns who have been teaching Patthana in Myanmar. So this talk is very much based on my doctoral research as well as ongoing research from the kind of research that I do to even now. So this is particularly I want to focus on how the Patthana is studied in Myanmar, in monastic education in Myanmar. So how monks, nuns, as well as lay people study the Patthana. And in particular, this talk will cover kind of what I now calling Abhidharma culture in modern Myanmar, meaning that as you will see, Abhidharma is a very unique features of Buddhism in Myanmar, and the way that not just monastic members but also lay people study and also practice and bring the practice into their daily life is very important and very much related with Abhidharma. And then I will explain what the Patthana is, and then the Patthana in daily practices in Myanmar. And then I want specifically focusing on Mula Patan Siado, Venerable Unarada method of the study of the Patthana. So this method is quite unique and quite interesting for scholar like me, for the students of Abhidharma like me, but also those who are interested in studying the Patthana itself. So I will be covering these 4 main points in this talk. So let's look at Abhidharma culture in modern Myanmar. Why do I use the term Abhidharma culture? Because if we look at the modern history of Myanmar, for example, or modern history of Buddhism in Myanmar, at least since late 19th century, what we see is that Abhidharma actually permeates the Burmese society, meaning that it's everywhere. We can see it in our popular culture, so all the images and things like that. Not only that, people in Myanmar also recite recite the Patana, for example. And also Abhidharma becomes the foundation for some of the meditation practices in Myanmar as well. So you can see here how it across different a range of practices, we see Abhidharma playing a key role in Myanmar. And the Patana, the use of Patana in daily practices is a good example, which I will explain a little bit more in detail later. Why Abhidharma is important? Based on not just my own research, but also research done by other scholars who work on Myanmar, we have shown that Abhidharma play a key role because for the Burmese Buddhists, the idea that Abhidharma as a great defense for the Buddha Sasana is play a key role. Why? Because according to various texts, we know that when the Buddha Sasana declined and the disappearance of Buddhism, it will start with the disappearance of the Patana. So the text that I study and the text that we're going to look at in detail in this talk. So this belief actually is quite strong, at least since late 19th century in Myanmar. And that's why it's Abhidharma has become a very a key role or a key text that Buddhists in Myanmar feel that, okay, we have to study in order to defend the Buddha Sasana, in order to prevent the Buddha Sasana from declining. So that idea and that belief is still ongoing, and that is quite a strong base. And that's why we see quite a lot of Abhidharma studies, Abhidharma related practices in Myanmar. So now you'll be wondering what the Patana is. So within that context, because the Patana is one of the first or the first text to disappear if the Buddha Sasana were to decline and disappear. So the Patana plays a key role in that context. Given that background, I want now to explain what the Patana is. Okay, so the Patana, as we know, is the final and the seventh text of Abhidharma Pitaka. And if we think about Abhidharma Pitaka as a whole kind of unit, we can see that the first 6 texts, starting from the Dhammasingani all the way to Yamaka, we can see that these 6 texts are actually analyzing our body and mind and our experience in terms of Dharma. So there were Dharmas here in this sense is the smallest components of the reality. What we in Theravada Buddhist worldview, we understand that the Dharmas are the smallest component of what we might call Paramattha Dharma, Paramattha, so the ultimate reality. And so the first 6 texts of the Abhidharma Pitaka is doing analysis. And then we have the final text, the Patana, is actually bringing everything together and synthesizing. So it's like highlighting how these different dharmas are related to each other. So the whole point of Patana is synthesizing and highlighting the conditional relations between these dharmas. And the way that the Patana does is highlight these conditional relations is through what we call 24 paccaya or 24 conditions. We can think of these 24 conditions or 24 paccaya as conditioning forces, so sati, the force that how these dharmas are related to each other. So one thing that I want to highlight here is in the Patana, what we see is how things are related, how these dharmas are related, and through what we can see here, conditioning forces. So we can see that. You might be wondering, okay, so the Patana is doing that. In Paticca Samuppada, in dependent origination, we also see how cause and effect. Paticca Samuppada is actually explaining the causation again. But what is the difference between Paticca Samuppada and the Patana? There's a key difference. In the Patana, we see how things are related. So the 24 Paccaya becomes a key factor in there. In dependent origination, especially in the canonical formulation, what we see is things that are related to each other, cause and effect. Okay, but the Patana there is moving a little bit a step further and explaining how things are related to each other. And that's why in the Visuddhimagga, the 5th century kind of meditation manual, if you like, by Buddhaghosa, there we find Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, explained in terms of the Patana. So in Visuddhimagga, we find the Paticca Samuppada and the Patana coming together. So that's kind of a general background. If we then look at the Burmese tradition, the Burmese tradition actually understand the Patana in terms of the Abhidhamma Sangaha, which is some scholars dated as early as 8th century, some scholars dated as late as 12th century. So somewhere in between these, this text can be dated to. But the Abhidhamma Sangaha is a very important text in the Burmese tradition. And the Burmese tradition, or Sayadaws and various authors in Myanmar, they use it in order to understand the Patana. So how do they do that? Like I said, the dharmas are related. The Patana is about how dharmas are related through 24 conditions. You can see it, this diagram actually shows it. So you have a conditioning dharma, what we might call cause, and then conditioned dharma, effect, and how things, these conditioning forces, the 24 paccaya. And in Burmese Abhidhamma tradition, what we find is these dharmas are expressed in terms of the list of dharmas that we find from Abhidhamma Sangaha. So the 8 can be all the conditioned dharmas, and as well as one and including the nibbana as well. And then why the effect is conditioned dharma. So there are specifically 169 dharmas, and then you have S as a 24 paccaya. So the whole point about this is that basically in Burmese Abhidhamma tradition, the way that most of the time we understand Patana is through Abhidhamma Sangaha, analysis of the dharmas. So this is a key point, which we don't find it in the canonical period or canonical text, but we find it in vernacular texts about the Patana, or at least the Nisaya, Pali Burmese Nisaya text. So this is just a background, and this slide is actually showing you the 24 Pachaya. So it starts from Hetu Pachaya, so the root condition, all the way to Avigata Pachaya, and non-disappearance condition. And so these are kind of a list of Pachaya. But one thing that I want to say here is these 24 Pachayas, they are also important in terms of our daily chanting as well, which is the point that I will come back to. If we think about the Patana also explain how the mind is understood in Abhidharma, Theravada Abhidharma tradition. So we can think of it like a model of the mind in Theravada. So because if we actually analyze and do the close reading of the Patana, what we will see is the Patana is actually talking about active mental process, viti chitta, and the continuation between these active processes. So which is, we use the term, very technical term, bhavanga. Okay, sometimes bhavanga is translated as life continuum in English sources. That's why it's like I'm using the term here, the continuation between these active processes, active mental processes. So my point here is that if we read the Patana very closely, we will be able to come up with a model of the mind as understood in Theravada Abhidharma. Another point that Patana makes is how our mental states change over time. So the point here is that if we think about making donation or dana, and of course we when we do dana, it is motivated by non-greed, because we want to make generosity. We want to let go, and we want to kind of make donations. So it is motivated by wholesome dharma, meaning kusala dharma. And because if we then rejoice in our dana, donation, then we will, after the dana, we will have non-greed and kusala dharma. So kusala dharma actually related to kusala dharma. And here, what I am highlighting here is decisive support condition, which is upanasya pachaya. So we can explain how kusala dharmas are related to kusala dharma through upanasya condition, upanasya pachaya. But we also find that actually in upanasya dharma, upanasya pachaya, we might start with wholesome dharma, so kusala dharma, non-greed, and then make donation, but it can lead to unwholesome dharma. Okay, so here the point is that when we make donation, if we then build some kind of pride and clinging or attachment to that kind of donation, the end result will be, or the effect will be unwholesome dharma, akusala dharma. So here, what we find is that, okay, we start with kusala dharma, we end up with akusala dharma. And this process of change happens because of our kind of non-wise attention, meaning that is not yoniso manasikara, ayoniso manasikara. So our attention becomes kind of unhealthy, not mindful, not wise. So you can also find this kind of relationship in relation to Upanishya Dharma, Upanishya Pachaya. So the Patthana is also talking about that, how our mental state change over time. So it's really about one way to understand the Patthana is talking about our mental processes, how our mental processes change over time, and also causation, so causality, how things are related, cause and effect. So these are the kind of, this is a way to understand the Patthana. And the whole Patthana text is about that. In Burmese edition of the Patthana, there are 5 books, but in the Thai edition, there are 6. But if we look at the whole Patthana on the whole, as a holistic text, then the Patthana is doing what I just mentioned here. Okay. Now I want to look at the Patthana in daily practices in Myanmar. And so like I mentioned, we mean like Buddhists in Myanmar, we all, most or at least many people recite the 24 Pachaya nearly every day. And some do it, 5 times a day, 9 times a day, and so forth. So there are certain practices that people do. Some people recite the Patthana longer session. Some even the whole 5 volumes of the Patthana. So personally, I've done the whole 5 volume twice recitation. I'm on the 3rd round. I'm still on the 3rd round. On that time doing it. So we can do it individually, or we do it as a communal practice. Sometimes we might use rosary beads. Sometimes we don't. So there's specific ways of doing the chanting and recitation of the Patthana. Another important aspect is the study of the Patthana. Okay, so like I mentioned, classes at Lay Abhidharma Association, the Patthana is part of their syllabus. One thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about the context, since late 19th century, or at least early 20th century in Myanmar, what we find is that Lay Abhidharma Association, there are so many, various Lay Abhidharma Association being created around since that time. And that means that lay people like me, we also study Abhidharma quite to a high degree. It's like some people kind of try to study the Abhidharma, the whole Abhidharma Pitaka on the whole. Some people are interested just in the Patthana, like me. so I work on the Patthana quite a lot. So the study of Abhidharma is very popular among lay people in Myanmar. And also since COVID period, people are now having classes online or on Zoom. And I want to draw your attention to this teacher. Her name is Dr Pyi. During my fieldwork, I met her, but she's still now teaching on Zoom Abhidharma, or this one is particularly on the Patthana. I think she must be around at least over 80, 85, perhaps approaching probably 90. But she's still teaching Abhidharma on Zoom, which is quite amazing. So let's look at the Patana recitation. I mentioned that individually or as a communal practice, we chant the Patana. This is in Myanmar, throughout Myanmar. The non-stop recitation of the whole 5 volume of Patana is very popular, and we find it in every quarter. Like every Dhamma hall in towns and among various areas, but also at nunneries, monasteries as well. This photo was from my PhD research during my field work. I was at this nunnery, and they were doing non-stop recitation of the Patana. I think it was for 7 days. Sometimes they do it for 5 days, or sometimes they do it 3 days. So it depends. And you can see here the kind of the nuns, they take turns. Okay, so I mean, whether it's the nuns or the monks or lay people as well, they when we do this kind of non-stop recitation, where we take turns, and for example, throughout the night as well, there will be nuns taking over I think it's every 15 minutes or 20 minutes. I have seen that if the monks were reciting, one monk would go for about half an hour or 1 hour, and then another monk will take over. That kind of continuation happening. And then the water bottle here is representing the 24 Pachaya. So it's part of the whole, in Theravada studies, we call it kind of material culture. We can see that there are specific components that which is part of the whole ceremony and the whole recitation process. But also, I mentioned that Abhidharma study is very popular among lay people, but particularly this is Abhidharma Propagation Association in Yangon, and they had 45th Abhidharma exam. It was during my field work, so 2012. It was in Yangon, and what they do is for 9 days, they hold these oral exams as well as written exams. And for my as part of my field work, as part of my Patana study, what I did was I memorized 55 pages of the Patana, and then I sat an oral exams. During that oral examination, what I had to do was recite 10 pages of Pali in 15 minutes, and we just have to do it. So you can see the photo here. It's me and then the examiner looking at the text, and then so it's a part of that process. I think I had to do it at least 2 days because they assign you to a certain time for oral examination, and then you have to go there, and then you have to do the recitation from memory. Okay, so it's all part of Patana studies in Myanmar, and it's quite an event. And also the written component, I did not do that, but I did the oral examination part. Now I want to move on to Mulapatan Seattle's methods. before I explain specific methods and specific way of studying the Patana, you may, as some of you may be very familiar with the Patana as well, and you will know that the Patana is organized in terms of 24 conditions. The Burmese way of studying the Patana is a little bit, it has become quite complex. That will be a way to explain it. We don't just study the Patana in terms of, from Hetu Pacaya to Aramana Pacaya, Adipati Pacaya. It's not like that. It's very much kind of through its own paradigms, its own system, and it has become quite complex. And we might be wondering, okay, how do we get from canonical text, which is quite a complete and complete way of looking at the Patana, to a little bit more complex way of studying the Patana? The reason we ended up all the processes that led to a very unique and quite a complex way of studying the Patana in Burmese tradition is through the study of commentaries, so Atthakatha, sub-commentaries, Tika, Mula Tika, Anu Tika, everything. So through that process, as well as the writings based on Burmese Sayadaws, and by now, 21st century, the way that we study the Patana, it has become quite complex. So that I want to highlight it from the beginning. And one way that one of the key figures that became very important in the study of the Patana, not just in Patana, but also Abhidharma on the whole, is this Sayadaw, Mula Patana, or Mula Patan Sayadaw. He's the translator of the Patana text published by Pali Text Society, and also various guidebooks published by Pali Text Society here in the UK. So he, when you search the Patana online in English, his translation will come up, and he's the main kind of Sayadaw who kind of revolutionize the kind of a way to study the Patana. So there are 4 key features according to his method of studying the Patana. The first one is that the 24 Pacaya are studied in terms of 9 main groups of the Pacaya and the subsidiary Pacaya within that main groups. So one thing is that, say, if we think about Aramana Pacaya, okay, so object condition, and object condition on its own is yes, it's one thing, but it can take many different forms. Sometimes the Aramana Pacaya becomes kind of play a key role. So it combines with Adipati Pacaya. So Aramana Adipati, meaning that the object becomes the dominant form. So here you can see how we are now talking about 2 Pacaya, 2 conditions. And so that's what I mean by kind of 9 main groups and then subsidiary group. You might be wondering where these groups come from. It comes from we can see it in the commentaries and sub-commentaries. So when we actually start reading, but not only in commentaries and sub-commentaries, actually, it also appears in the canonical text as well. So if we pay really close attention to the canonical Patana, we will start seeing these subsidiary Pachaya. Another key feature is the recitation formulas. These formulas are written in Burmese. They help us to memorize and remember key components of a conditional relations. And I will talk about that with an example later. And then in terms of this new approach, we study the Patthana in terms of key chapters. So the first 6 chapters are grouped together and we study it as a whole. And then Panyawara, which is more kind of analytical, a little bit more detailed, we study on its own. So we kind of divide the text into 2, at least 2. And then we use tables. As you may know already, when we look at Abhidharma studies in Myanmar, we see quite a lot of tables. And we use it here for the Patthana study as well. Right. So the studying Pachaya or condition in terms of groups. I won't go into too much detail about this because it's rather quite technical and we have to know specific things. But we can see here one thing that I want to highlight based on this slide is there's a particular session in the Patthana. This is where we can actually start seeing the grouping that I mentioned. And basically 24 Pachaya is organized in terms of main groups. And if we then look at the development in Myanmar tradition or Burmese tradition, we can see that various Myanmar Siaros and also Myanmar teachers, they have expanded these groupings in terms of subsidiary and things like that. By Mula Patan Siaro, we can suddenly see that there are individual, 56 Pachayas. 50, so you might be wondering, okay, you have 24 Pachayas and then now we have 56. They are the same, but not quite the same. So the point here is that because of different ways of categorizing, grouping, we can actually expand 24 Pachayas in terms of to get to 56 Pachaya. Okay, and we use that in the study of Patthana in Myanmar. And the purpose of this is to make the Patthana study easier when we analyze the conditional relations in terms of 4 ultimate dharmas. A few slides back, I mentioned that in Burmese tradition, we study the Patthana through Abhidhamata Sangaha, this 12th century Abhidharma manual. Okay, and the 4 ultimate dharmas that mentioned there, Chitta, Chittasika, Rupa, and Nibbana. In order to understand the Patthana in terms of these 4 ultimate dharmas, paramata dharmas, this approach is very helpful, I would say. So that's why it's like it has become why Mula Patan Siaro actually emphasize this approach. So to make the study of the Patthana easier. Specifically, we can recall quite easily if we memorize certain things. So going now, I want to talk about this recitation formulas. In Myanmar, we call it soyo. Okay, and soyo, this technique is very learning technique is very important, not just in the Abhidharma study, but also in other area of study. So there are certain soyo also, soyo to study the Vinaya, the Dharma, the sutras. So Pacific texts will have Pacific soyo, and for monastic students, it's very easy. These formulas make it easier to understand and remember things. Coming back to the study of the Patana with the soyo, here again, what I show in this table is is the development that we see. So in the 18th century, we start seeing the soyo, so recitation formulae, in one of the kind of Patan Nisaya. We call it, we can say it as a Nisaya, written by Nanda Meda, Siaro Nanda Meda. And then, but in the 20th century, we then start seeing kind of Mula Patana Siaro focusing on single enumeration. So it's a much shorter soyo or formulae. And why is it important? So here, the main purpose of this feature is to remember key points that are related to a condition. The above example is about root condition, Etupachaya. The student should then be able to use it and expand on it for further study. So I want to highlight here a single enumeration. So single enumeration here means that this formulae, this soyo, just focus on the Hetupachaya, one condition, and one pachaya. And that's what we mean by single enumeration. Some conditional relations can be related to each other through 2 pachayas, 3 pachayas, and so forth. So it's rather complex system. But for now, to understand this, the whole point of using soyo, especially the single enumeration format, is that the students will be able to remember and then should be able to expand it and condense it, if they need to. Okay, so this expansion is also important. How can you make it larger, as it were, and then condensing it down, make it smaller, make it more concrete. So you people who are, or students who are expert in these kind of things, they should be able to do that. And soyo is to help you to do that. Another point which I should also have mentioned is that Patana, if we look at as a whole, in terms of in terms of its structure, it's very complex. And this diagram is actually showing you different chapters and different sections within that. Basically, you can expand the whole thing out to quite a large extent. I won't go into that because it's rather complicated, and I need more time to include these kind of things. But going back to the study of the Patana, why do we study like I mentioned, the first 6 chapters are studied together. So you might be wondering, what are the 6? So the 6 chapters are Pateja Vara, Sahajata Vara, Pachaya Vara, Nesaya Vara, Sansata Vara, Sampayota Vara. These 6 chapters are grouped together and then we study these together. And then we have Panyawada. We studied that on its own. Why? Because the first 6 chapters, if we look at the Pali itself, the syntax is the same, except that we see, in the Patejawada, we see Pateja as a key term used there to explain the conditional relations. Sahajada, we find Sahajada as a key term. So in terms of Pali syntax, it's the same. And also in terms of the nature of what they are talking about, is the same. That's why we study the first 6 chapters together. And then Panyawada is a little bit more, in terms of Pali syntax, is a little bit more complex, and the nature of things that it's explained is a bit more complex. But the point here is that it makes the study of the Patthana much simpler way to study. So the final point here is the use of tables. So you can see here one is Burmese version, and then we have a English version, both by Siaro Mulapatan Siaro Unarada. And the use of the Patthana is a pedagogical tool, so it's a teaching tool. They aid memorization. Table also help us to see an overall picture of all the conditional relations. So using the tables, we can actually see key components, what they are and how they are related. So it's a very useful tool. Very recently, I met a scholar from US who works on Cambodia and Northern Island traditions, and he used the term he calls it palace. So it's like a table, like a palace that you have categorized these different things, and it's quite grand. Actually, it's quite complex. You can see it here, this table. Okay, and this is actually from Panyawada. So the final text here or chapter, this chapter, Panyawada, and then you can see how complex texts are represented in tables. But it's actually very helpful in terms of memorization. When I was memorizing for the oral exams, I drew my own tables, and then I use it to memorize the text. Right. So we looked at the modern ways of modern meaning, like 20th century, 21st century ways of studying the Patthana in Myanmar. But I want to highlight here how we got there, basically. So if we start from the bottom, we can see that this is kind of canonical Patthana. I'm using the dating from my teacher, as well as my PhD examiner, Lance Cousin. He dated Patthana to 200 BCE to 200 CE. So it's a quite early text. And then what we find is the Buddha Ghosa's Patthana Atthagata, and then Mulatika, Anutika at various stages. And then this is a key text which I kept going back to. I keep going back to Abhidhamma Sangaha. So here what we find is the summary of 24 Pachaya. And then looking specifically in the Burmese tradition, from the second half of the 18th century, we see quite a lot of Patana Nisaya, and then so they have different features. Okay, so content structure, but it doesn't explain semantic meaning. So which I think in at least in northern Thailand tradition, Nisaya they slightly different from Nisaya that we find in the northern Thailand tradition. It's a yaga. This is the Myanmar term, Burmese term, but basically it's explaining the relationship in terms of four paramata dharmas, the four ultimate realities, and then ways to give vipinga, meaning that it's how to expand the text, basically. So this is what we start seeing from the 18th century, and then all the way up to here, from 1990s onwards. And currently, if you go and go to, say, Shwedagon Pagoda and look at the books selling at Shwedagon Pagoda, and then you will see handbooks for monks and nuns. And what you see quite a lot of tables and diagrams, as well as different ways to memorize, you to memorize and recite. So it's a feature of Abhidharma study in Myanmar. Okay, there are quite so many different student handbooks these days. This is a kind of showing you a graph from what we saw here. Basically, I summarize it in terms of the graph. So we see the canonical text, but also we start seeing pedagogical literature, Patana pedagogical literature, meaning teaching methods, handbooks, and so forth. So you can see the whole development of the Pali as well as the Burmese text on the Patana. So this slide is slightly off track in a way, but it's a very important point, which is that as you know, there are centers of monastic education in Myanmar, at least since late 19th century. Okay, and Mandalay, as you may know, is still a very big, influential monastic center, education center, center of monastic education. Bakogu is another one. Dao Myo, Yangon, Nyangdong, Molamyang, these places are very popular and they have large teaching monasteries and nunneries. But I want to highlight here Bakogu method. So the Bakogu method is a well-known teaching method and studying method for canonical texts, as well as any kind of literature. What it means is that they start from studying the canonical text, looking at Athakatha, Tikas, Gandhi, Nisaya, and other kind of later vernacular texts. And it's like digging through the text. And that's what literally means. So Janji Pap. So you dig through the text. And those who have completed Bakogu method, or who has educated from Bakogu monasteries, we would refer to them as Janji Pap. So he has dug through the text. And the reason I'm showing this and explaining this here is what we saw here. Basically, if we look at this is what my not just my way, but the Burmese Seattles who have written on Abhidharma and the Patthana, they have done that. So basically, they are looking through through different layers of text and incorporating and developing new ways of studying the Patthana, new ways of studying the Abhidharma. And so it comes it's part of Bakoku method, what we might call Bakoku method. Okay, I want to end today's talk by highlighting the sources. So, like I mentioned, my PhD thesis is on the Patthana, and recently I published 2 more articles. One is looking at the development of the study of the Patthana in Myanmar from the 18th century. So here I explain what I kind of touched briefly on this talk. Another one is calculating the total number of questions in the Patthana. This piece is actually looking at how many questions can we formulate from the Patthana. Patthana is like it's following one of the standard kind of way of, you have a question session and then you have answer session. Okay, so question and answer. And this particular piece is actually looking at that. It's looking at how many numbers of questions can you formulate. And according to the Mulatika, the Tika, Mulatika of the Patthana, we can formulate at least 38 billion questions. I mean, so it's a huge number. So I will end. I will stop here. I think we have some time for Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Pyi, for the very interesting and in detail talk. So today maybe we can give the opportunity for the audience to ask certain questions. Any questions from the audience to Dr. Pyi? ใครมีคำถามไหม
Hello. Thank you so much,
Hi.
Dr. Pyi. Good to see you again. And even though I have attended so many lectures on the Patthana by yourself, it's like every time is learning something new. So I'm going to ask something about one of the last remarks that you made. The fact that there are 30 billion, if I'm not wrong, was that correct? 30 billion, or even if it's million, it doesn't change much. Questions. So given the fact that the Patthana is so vast, what does it mean for someone to be an expert in the Patthana if there is no material time in one life to explain the Patthana? So what does it mean to know, to understand the Patthana?
So personally, to know, so for me, yes, the Patthana is vast and it's very complex. But one of the key features in the Patthana, which is quite neat, not just in Patthana, I think it is applicable to Abhidharma on the whole, Abhidharma Pitaka on the whole, other texts in the Abhidharma Pitaka, is that it has certain paradigms or certain ways of categorizing different things, different methods and things like that. So for me, in order to understand, if you can actually understand the structure, I mean, that's why I started kind of trying to understand what is the structure of the Patthana. I think that is one of the key things. We may not have, in this lifetime, I may not have the whole, I may not be able to cover every session of the Patthana, and I may not able to unravel the Piyala in the Patthana, okay, the abbreviation in the Patthana. That doesn't mean that we cannot understand the Patthana. I think we can understand it by looking at the structure and what it's trying to say. It's just the individual components will get changed, and individual things will be left out, and all these different things happening there. But on the whole, if we can actually hold the structure of the Patthana in one's mind, we will be able to understand the Patthana. And your question is, what does it mean? It means that for me, I can see that it's the dependent. I can see that the Theravada understanding of causation or causality is very complex. Basically, it's very complex. It may not be like what we find in Mahayana texts. It may not be like in Mahayana sutras and things like that. Not that kind of complexity, or not that kind of philosophy, because we don't normally talk about ontology and metaphysics, not in that sense, when it comes to Theravada. But what we can understand is that how different things work for Theravada understanding of causation and causality. And if we can actually understand that, we are able to apply, whether in daily life or in our study, in our academic practices. Another key component for me, quite interesting, is if we understand the Patthana in that way, how different combination or permutation, whichever terms that we want to use, how different paccayas are rotated. Actually, we can apply that to our study of the Vinaya as well, because in the Vinaya, we also find a lot of rotation of these specific formulas, which is one aspect that I want to study a bit more in detail, because I find these kind of rotation and different combinations of different components of the text is very interesting for me. And and if I were to give a very devout Buddhist answer to your question, it means that I'd be able to accumulate quite a lot of merit, and also I can also hopefully at one point I will gain Nibbana at some point.
Thank you so much.
Hello. May I get the permission from Sangha? So thank you for your lecture. Since your research area is Patthana, you are much familiar and you have that expertise in Patthana. But for the beginners, in Patthana, we learned that there are 24 paccayas. We call the Chatuvisati paccayas, and there are the same number, 24 Patthanas, Chatuvisati Patthanas. So basically the 24 paccayas, we cannot minimize or we cannot maximize them, because studying purpose, we just combine them, like Aramanadipati, these kinds of new ways are introduced to the study area. So and there are some other methods, like as you mentioned, like 7 cycles, 7 varas.
Yes.
And like Panjhavara, and also the Matikas also, they are the group of 3 triads and group of 2 the dyads, so-called these different ways to study and memorize these things and to explain these things. Can you briefly make any like a brief introduction for these differences about these 24 pachayas, 24 pathanas, and how they are interrelated in a way to construct these cycles, the varas, to get a brief understanding for a beginner about the patthana.
Okay, thank you for that question. So the 24 pachayas. So we have to understand that 24 pachayas are what we call 24 sati or conditioning forces. Okay, so that is one. I want you to keep that aside for now. But when we then look at the 24 patthana, so this is if I remember correctly, it's in the commentaries ways of again classifying the patthana in terms of different session. Okay, so that one what you need to normally I don't keep that in mind when I study the patthana. Why? Because it makes things a little bit more confusing. Because you have the 24 pachaya and then 24 patthana. 24 patthana is like trying to understand the patthana structure in terms of 24 session, basically. And it's helpful in some sense, but it's just one way of looking at it. The way I would explain to a beginner is that, okay, you have the 24 pachayas, 24 conditions. Those 24 conditions actually can be applied. What I want to show you is, can you see the structure, my slides?
Yes, we can see.
Yes. Okay. So here, 24 pachayas, they appear in every aspect of these different sessions. Okay. So 24 pachayas, it appears, it is listed in Pachayo Desa, Pachaya Desa, and then we have again appears in the Pochavara and then answer questions and so forth. So it appears in everything. And the way to understand it is that currently what we see when we look at the text, okay, we see the list, a brief explanation, and then we see the Pochavara. And then what we start seeing is the Patejavada. So when we look through the text, okay, so Patejavada, when we see it, is we have to understand that it's from the answer question, okay. So and then the next one that we see is Sahajatawara, and then Pachaya, and then so forth, and then all the way to Panyawara. This level is important because that's what we see in volume 1 of either Burmese edition or the Thai edition. Okay, and then what the dharmas are? What dharmas are we talking about? We are talking about Tika Patthana. Okay, so we are now talking about Tika. So the triplet dharmas group in terms of 3 things: Kusala Dharma, Akusala Dharma, and Vyagada Dharma. So that's what we see, first things. And then what we then see is how they are related. So we see that these dharmas are related in terms of anuloma, so straightforward manner. We don't see in later we see it in terms of reverse, but this is what we see when we look at the text. So that's what I mean. Like if we want to expand it out, we can actually start expanding gradually, and basically what we find is you don't need to actually, in a way, kind of worry too much about these structure, these components at the moment. But if you just look at the Tika Pantana, is we are talking about the triplets, and then Dukkha Patana is in terms of twos, okay, couplets, and then Tika and Dukkha. So how these Tika and Dukkhas are combined. So what does that mean? It means that when we look at the canonical Patana, what we see is we use the Matika list, Tika and Dukkha. So at the beginning of the Dhammasangani, and then we apply it to the Patana. Okay, so for me, it's when we talk about the dharmas in the Patana, we are mainly talking about Tikas and Dukkhas from the Matika and how they appear in the canonical Patana. I keep using the word canonical Patana because if we then look at the Burmese Abhidharma tradition, normally what we see is when we study the Patana, we see in terms of 4 ultimate dharmas, so Paramattha Dharma, because they are using quite a lot of paradigms from Abhidhamma Sangaha. Okay, but so we have to kind of separate and understand. Okay, which is which are we talking about? Okay, so I would say that level 4 is important. So because it's Pateja Vara and different Varas. And then you have Tika. That's why it's like Patana is quite complex, because you start in the later kind of session, we start seeing how dharmas are kind of bring together in multiple ways, and then how Pachayas are bring together, so or rotated. So we start seeing the rotation of the Pachaya as well. So it's quite a complex system. I'm not sure whether that answer your question.
Yeah, that's enough. That's enough. So you are advised to start the Patana studies for a beginner would be the starting from the Panhavara, the first triplet, Kusalatika.
Yes. So start with the Kusalatika. That is very important, because you will find that Kusalatika or Kusalapatana session of the Kusalatika session of the Patana is the most comprehensive one. If we start moving to Vedana, so the second group, then what we see is a lot of abbreviation. We see a lot of Piyalats coming in together there. So that's why it's important to start with Kusalatika.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a small thing? Actually, I'm not very master on Patana, but I was looking at your presentation, and I had a small question on this Pakoku method of this learning of Patana. So actually, I'm not aware about this, so I wanted to clarify this one. When when we are looking at the Pali, the evolution of the Pali literature and how these have been developed in the history, so we are looking at this after the Buddhaghosa Mahathera's Atthakatha. So then the second phase we see the Gantipada, and thereafter we see the Tika, and thereafter we go for the Nisaya and Sanna in Sinhala is Sanna and everything. So, but you mentioned that this Pakoko method, so canonical text, then it moves to Atthakatha, and it moves to Tika, and then Ganti and Nisaya. So I wanted to clarify what is the difference between this, the historical development of this Pali literature and this Pakuku method of studying Patana.
So the I want to kind of explain the first part, which is the study of the Patana through different layers of text. My understanding is that yes, we have canonical, and then we have Atthakatha, Mulatika, and then Nutika, and then we then have various kind of Abhidharma manuals or Abhidharma later texts. And then, at least in Myanmar, as far as I know, we start seeing Abhidharma Nesaya. Okay, Nesaya, and then Nesaya in different forms, basically. Sometimes we see literal translation, so it's word by word kind of Nesaya, but also particularly to in Abhidharma, especially Patana, I think Yamaka, and then Dhatukatha. There we see a yaga, what we call a yaga, meaning that this is where we start saying explaining Abhidharma text in terms of 4 Paramattha Dharmas. So the Bani Sayadaws, they are using the Abhidharmata Sangaha categorization as a way to understand and expand the Abhidharma and these texts. Particularly the text that I mentioned, Yamaka, Patan, Vendadukata, and then there's another text. So that's what we then see. And then between that, as far as I know, the Patana, around that time, we start seeing Ganti as well. So Ganti is more, I'm not sure about other in Sri Lanka and in in Thailand as well as Laos traditions or even Cambodian traditions. I'm not sure what it looks like, but in Burmese tradition, at least, we see Gandhi as a more like a very detailed. They're discussing specific points, and in terms of Q&A kind of format. And the texts that I have studied and I have looked at, they use Burmese as a main language. Of course, we find Pali terms and things like that. But in that Kanji, we find these kind of explanation. So as far as I know, it's like in terms of dating, I'm not quite sure whether we can date Nasaya and Gandhi the same period because I have not looked at that kind of history as it were, or the development. But based on what I know, Gandhi is a little bit later, although I might be wrong. I'm not quite sure. I have to look at the Pacific Seattles who have written Gandhi on the Patana and their dates. And then we start seeing the pedagogical later kind of manuals and texts. So going back to the other component about the Bakoku method. we although here I on the slide I said canonical text Atakta Tika, and then I went to Gandhi Nisaya. Again, there it might be that Gandhi and Nisaya they might be interchangeable or anything, but my understanding is that in Pakoku method, Seattle's they use probably use kind of Pali Burmese Nisaya as well as any text being written by Nyama Seattle's basically, and they use that as a way to study the Patana, and another point which I want to make here is that Pakoku method, it also applies to other study of Abhidhamma as well as the other texts, Vinaya, Suttas as well. So the unique features of Pakoku method is that it goes through the different layers of text, whether it's the Patana or Abhidhamma or Vinaya or Suttas. That's what they normally do, which is slightly different from, say, Mandali as well, Mandali method, which is more focusing on more like what we might call philological approach, meaning that it's like looking at a word and then trying to expand it and then using any grammatical analysis and things like that. So it's more philological ways of understanding Buddhist texts. So currently that's my understanding. If I get a chance to do more research on that, my mind might change because I might find new things. Yes.
Yeah.
I hope that
Okay.
answers your question.
Yeah. Okay. So then I think that so your word ganti may mislead sometimes if it is not actually a ganti. It might mislead someone. So then because we saw some manuals on Abhidhamma and everything. So then the manuals the way in even in Geiger's chronological orders, he mentioned word like pakarana or something, but in case of Abhidhamma we have a different pakarana. So then I wanted to suggest that you would look at further on this word ganti, because when we use the word ganti, it has a separate set of literature called ganti. That's why. So if you don't be hesitate what I said. So thank you.
Can may I ask? So which period are we talking about? This Gandhi
Actually, when we look at the Pali, so the Ganti is before the 10th century. So we look at that the Tika, the composition of the Tika started after the 10th century. So the common accept is that the Visuddhimagga Tika is the first Tika composition, and Abhidhamma Mula Tika, and even the Vajrabuddha Tika in case of in case of Vinaya. So this all the traditionally we accept that they are in the 10th century. So then all Ganti Pada we see in the Pali literature before the 10th century normally, because all these Tika and every Tika authors cite the Ganti literature. So then it's basically we can see that is early phase of this.
Right. Thank you for that information. I think it's well, I should have mentioned that Ganti as in what we see in Burmese tradition, which is slightly different. Yes.
Okay, so I think just time for ending the session. Thank you very much, Dr. Pyi, for very nice talk. So we end this afternoon session. Okay, so we can. we think it's already 4:00. Maybe we leave it
Yeah.
for okay. We can pay respect to the Buddha together to end the session. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภคะวาพุทธังภคะวันตังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตภคะวตาธัมโมธัมมังนัมสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามิ